In this fairly large book, the author, Iain McGilchrist, goes into the differences between the two hemispheres, challenging what the kind of pop science understanding of these differences are. Speech is usually attributed to the left hemisphere, while the visual spatial functions are attributed to the right, and the left hemisphere is supposed to be the more logical one, while the right hemisphere is the more emotional one. And there are many such differences that are usually attributed to the two hemispheres. What the author proposes in his book is that it's not a matter of which function, but is how we use these functions. The left understanding of the world is aimed at a sort of grasping of reality that allows for manipulation, while the right hemisphere has a more kind of holistic understanding of the world, is able to understand the totality of it, while the left hemisphere has to sort of break down the surroundings into components and can only see discrete parts, can only see the whole as made of different parts. So the left hemisphere is really goal-oriented. It wants to grasp reality in order to manipulate it. The right hemisphere is it's sort of more, it sits back and takes in reality without any kind of like ulterior motive, so to speak. So it's a more holistic understanding that the right hemisphere has. Why is music relevant in this discussion? Well, because music is, as McGilchrist argues, it's not made of individual components. It's not made of individual notes or individual rests. It's not made of discrete elements, but it emerges from the totality of the piece. What's relevant in music is in-betweenness of things. So it's how one thing relates to the next. So the left hemisphere is more responsible for speech, and language, though, it's not necessarily only in the left hemisphere. In fact, when we read poetry is something that activates more the right hemisphere than the left. Poetry is based on metaphor, is based on meanings that are not just the semantic categories that we have for each word, and doesn't necessarily follow syntax. So it's less rule-based and more relating to like something other than itself. There is an interesting Mendelssohn quote where he says, "The thoughts that are expressed to be by music I love are not too indefinite to be put into words, but on the contrary, too definite," which, you know, makes sense in a way if you understand how music can be very specific in what it conveys. You wouldn't be able to explain that specificity with words. Similarly, Nietzsche says, "Compared with music, all communication by words is shameless. Words dilute and brutalize. Words depersonalize. Words make the uncommon common." So this is to say that language is far from being the only way of conveying meaning. Music is one of these fields where since you take language completely away, the semantic component completely away from the communication, then what's left is something else, and that something else is a domain of the right hemisphere. If we want to explain a piece of music with words, trying to really break it down to its smallest components, and try to recreate, kind of reverse engineer a piece of music, describing why it's beautiful, describing why it's satisfactory, describing why it gives us a certain experience, that's an impossible task, because there is no way of conveying the meaning of the music, even with very accurate or seemingly accurate words. What the music conveys exists only in the music. Same thing for a joke. If I try to explain a joke before I tell the joke and why the joke is funny, it will never convey the hilarity of it. It will always be just an explanation of it, which will not be funny ever.
Funny how? I mean, what's funny about it?
Tommy, no, you got it all wrong.
Oh, Anthony. He's a big boy. He knows what he said. What'd you say?
You're right.
Funny how?
My right hemisphere will just understand the hilarity of the joke or the beauty of the musical piece, and will not need an explanation for it. It will just immediately take it in. While the left hemisphere is a mediated sort of knowledge that needs to break things down. It needs to verbalize. It needs to break things down and then build it over again, which is a useful tool in many cases. And even for composers, we tend to usually think in both ways. We tend to break things down and understand why we like certain things, and then we put them back together in a way that to us is satisfactory. But at least as far as I'm concerned, the final call is always given by the right hemisphere. It needs to go through that last step where I my right hemisphere vouches for the worthiness of that piece. And that's never based on a theoretical assessment. The second part of the book is related to culture and history, and the way that these two hemispheres have played a role into the making of the Western world, as the subtitle suggests. Iain McGilchrist thinks that in current times we are living under a left hemisphere predominance. So the understanding of the world is heavily biased towards the left hemisphere. This brings the discussion back to my previous videos, in which I argued that an idea like progress has been detrimental to contemporary classical music. And progress, reading it through the lenses of this book, is very much of a left hemisphere reading of reality, because progress implies a linear understanding of time. So progress is just you can measure time based on progress, based on how much you are proceeding towards a certain goal. And this is very much something that the left hemisphere is biased towards. And also the idea of music becoming an academic discipline and being assimilated to sciences or a scientific sort of approach, where it becomes sort of like a pseudoscience, where we can do research, pin down our progress into measurable steps. That's very much a left hemisphere thinking. And also the idea of conceptualizing a work of art so that we can express it into words. So many times in these days, you can see how pieces of music come with a set of explanations, with program notes that explain why this music behaves like it does. And sometimes these explanations are very important, sometimes as important as the music itself. The verbalization of a work of art is a way of adapting something that is not understandable by the left hemisphere, meaning the work of art, making it understandable to the left hemisphere by putting into a certain set of ideas and concepts that the left hemisphere can grasp. The logocentrism that we are living in today can be read as a left hemisphere bias. McGilchrist almost assigns different personalities to the two hemispheres, with the left hemisphere being kind of confident and almost arrogant in its understanding of reality and wanting to pin everything down to recognizable and logical categories, and thinking that if something is not known, can be known, and if it's something is not explainable, it's probably not important. While the right hemisphere is more pessimistic, more kind of Zen in a way that does not engage, suspends judgment, and it is in fact the right mindset, open mindset, to appreciate something like a work of art, where you want the work to speak to you. So spoiler alert, the master in the title is the right hemisphere and the left is the emissary. Because the right hemisphere is supposed to have a broader understanding of reality that the left hemisphere focused, manipulative, grasping functions are not able to. But for the author, right now we live in a era where the left hemisphere is predominant, and the left hemisphere is important, and we need to have both kinds of understanding of reality, because without the left hemisphere, for instance, the accumulation of knowledge, the scientific advancement and technology would not really exist, because without language, without being able to transmit our knowledge to future generations, we wouldn't be able to progress. And there is such a thing as a technological progress and scientific advancement. And these are very much the realm of the left hemisphere. But when we take manipulation and technology and utilitarian sort of thinking out of the equation, everything else is pretty much the domain of the right hemisphere. So this gets to a very kind of philosophical discussion of why and how to understand reality, what it is there to understand to begin with. But also philosophy sometimes has created more problems than solutions, because a lot of philosophy has been heavily influenced by rationalistic thinking. So the idea of privileging rationality over anything else, just think of Descartes, for instance, and where everything that can be proved logically is worthy of philosophy, and everything else is kind of discarded, not necessarily giving us the whole picture, as things like music, I think, tend to demonstrate. And my criticism of the current state of contemporary classical music is very much in tune with this, because it kind of discards all of the intuitive understanding of things such as beauty in music, and it's built on a theoretical sort of self-conscious approach to music making, and that is detached from a general embodied understanding of music as it has always been. So this was just a general discussion about the Master and His Emissary, in particular, what I think is relevant when it comes to music. I find this book really interesting. There are many videos on YouTube, interviews to the author. I think none of them are really replace the importance of reading the book. So I encourage you to give it a shot. And if you have any comments or questions, please let me know in the comments. If you want to subscribe, you can do that. I would appreciate that. And until the next time, take care.